it was time to build an ark. It was pretty intense when it was coming down. We had a mudslide today.
This is my place of worship. It's been a place of refuge for me. It's been a place I love to be. As I look at this picture, it's amazing that there was 3 to 5 feet of mud there. How did this happen? Well, let me show you. Several weeks earlier, a fire had started and engulfed about 400 acres in a place called Buckley Draw. Buckley Draw is a very steep ravine. The terrain made it very difficult for firefighters to safely contain this fire. After several weeks, it was still only about 20% contained. As a result, this fire created a terrible burn scar. What you're looking at here is a photograph taken by our stake president, Brian Hopkins. He warned the city of Provo, if we have water or mud flow, it will end up here. Here is right across the street from our church. What President Hopkins couldn't have known was a week later, we had a microburst. A microburst is a sudden, powerful deluge of rain. For 30 minutes, nearly an inch of water filled Buckley Draw and the surrounding area. It didn't take long for the mud to flow. Here you can see the water flowing across Nevada Avenue and into our church parking lot. The parking lot quickly filled with mud. The next morning, this is what we found. Looking at Buckley Draw, you can see in the center of this picture where the mud began. And a lot of mud came down. That's our church in the background. You're looking at 3 to 5 feet of mud. The mud breached the kitchen door, which is on the east side of the building, quickly filled that room, the east hallway, and the young women's room, and a couple of other rooms. In this picture, there's over 3 feet of mud on the other side of that glass door. Miraculously, those glass doors held. Thankfully, the next day, over 200 volunteers showed up, myself included,
This is the
ready to help.
lawn area of our chapel, and it's filled with mud right about straight out in front of me. It gets about 2.5 to 3 feet deep, and I just about fell face first in there. And as you can see by looking at my legs here, it's pretty deep, and I didn't know if I'd make it out. I had some help from this good man in front of me, helped me out. Now, as I say, there's power in our stake presidency, and so over here we have there's the parking lot. You can see the entry to the foyer over there is pretty deep in mud. Hey,
if you look carefully, you'll see that I'm wearing
We've been
a nasal
digging out
cannula.
this morning.
I have an oxygen tank on my back,
A lot with this mud flow.
which I still am taking supplemental
crazy.
oxygen.
I don't know.
I could have never done this without that.
So we started
On this
way
day
down
and
there,
for
worked our
many
way
days
around.
after,
It was
I had
times
a
you
lot
could-
of strength.
If you look at my pants, I mean, I've been.
Though by the end of the day, I was tired. I was very tired.
The mud was this deep here. There was a lot of water up
What
there.
I did here took a
Water we
toll
had
on
to
me.
Drain out. It was a mess, but we're slowly making progress.
That I'm still paying for.
And it's been great. There's been a lot of people here helping. It's been wonderful. So, just stand. Until next time.
How long have you been here for?
I got here. What time is it? It's not 11:45. I've been here about 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
All the mud that flowed, this is where they deposited it. It was a big field here. So all the mud that was in the church and a lot that was on the streets ended up here. And this is what the building looked like at the end of the first day. On day 2, you can see that a lot of mud has been removed. Approximately 3 feet there.
That plywood panel on the left is where the mud burst through the kitchen door and into the building.
Now we're starting to clean out the inside of the building. The building was under so much pressure that some of those walls were actually bowing inward, holding back the weight of all that mud. Fortunately, the building was sound, it held, it held strong, for which we are grateful. Here's cleanup day 3. Now this is the kitchen area looking into the young women's room, and all of the mud is gone. Well, at least the bulk of it. There's still a lot of cleanup to do. And the sheetrock's been torn out. This is the young women's room. And this is the east hallway. And there's a little bit of the culture hall or the gym. The Sabbath day was a day of rest. And here's cleanup on day 4. This sister here is cleaning the hallway. This brother is cleaning up the lamps, the lighting. They'll later be cleaning off the bottom of those curtain divides. You can see how the mud was there, and there they are cleaned up. The cultural hall, thankfully, was really spared. Those doors held going into there. Okay, this is the east parking lot looking north. These drains were filled with mud. They were totally clogged and they had to be cleaned out. The sidewalks are being pressure washed and the building's been pressure washed. And it's starting to look beautiful again. This is on Monday. This is what it looked like when I was getting ready to go home after my shift.
The mudslide didn't just hit our church. Here's some security footage from Robin Roberts, who owns Dynamic Collision Repair, taken right after the microburst started. Check out how fast the parking lot fills up with water. Now Robin's going to tell us what he saw.
The water had come right up to the door, so this was all water from that original thing, and then the mud was underneath it. So when I first came, it was just lots of water, and I didn't think anything that there was any mud. But once the water drained, well, it deposited 8 inches of mud. Now, everything was pretty well covered in mud, all the way, well, you can see, all the way up to my brick. But in the center here where it was low, it was probably 8 inches of mud.
I'm talking to Robin Roberts, Dynamic Collision Repair in Provo.
Okay, Bob, could you tell us what you saw, please?
Oh, just when I looked out the window, which at a few times, but the later times there was a actual river coming right down here.
Okay.
The gutter to where it was up, obviously on the lawn part here a little ways, and then out, say it was about 10:30.
Okay. And then you mentioned you also got up later in the evening and saw it again?
And just looked out, and there was still a steady stream flowed right down the street.
Just straight down the hill.
Yeah. It was amazing how fast the water was moving on.
This is the water that Bob Dunn describes coming down the hill. And here it is flowing in to the basement of a home.
This is inside the home that we saw the water pouring into the window. Notice the dumpster on the right with more things to go in a dumpster. A neighbor that was also hit, and another neighbor further up the hill. All by this microburst flood.
Julie Roberts, she has a really wonderful story to share. Why don't you just tell us what happened?
After the fire and the rain and all the little things that happened in our neighborhood, I woke up on Thursday morning, the 28th, I believe it was 28th, and my husband said, "You won't be able to go to work today." And so I came out and looked, and sure enough, our street in front of our house was covered in mud. And there were big trucks, and just right out here, it's covered in mud. There were big trucks working on the road. It was probably about 4 inches of sludge and mud and just very hard, slippery, yucky mud that had come down. And so we were told we could go to the church and help at the church because it had been hit with the mudslide as well. As we were going towards church, we noticed our neighbors just to the north of us, their cul-de-sac had been hit by the mud really bad. And our neighbors had the mud go into their garage. So we stopped by there and helped them for several hours. We worked hard.
That was in the next cul-de-sac, correct?
Cul-de-sac, yeah.
Great, okay.
And we didn't think about calling anyone to help us because we're the type of people that you just get busy and just do what needs to be done. So I went to my husband's shop, and there's about 4 to 6 inches of mud there. So we started shoveling and sweeping and hosing down the ground as best we could, trying to get that out. And I kept waiting for somebody to help us, the city to help us or someone. And the city came and they kind of worked on the sidewalk a little bit. And we asked if they could come and help us, and they said, yeah, they would. And then it ended up they can only do part of it because it's private property. And so let's say I just went to a really dark place that night, and the next day it was even worse because I just felt like we were invisible. I felt like nobody cared. You know, we had to take care of this all of ourselves. It was our problem, but it wasn't our problem. And the feeling came to me when I was at that dark place that I've spared your house and I spared your cul-de-sac. And so I felt a little bit chastised, but I also felt loved because the Lord did spare us. Since this has happened, we've had so many people reach out to us and say, why didn't you call me? Why didn't you call me? And so even though in the midst of it, we felt kind of alone, I was able to realize later on how many people really do care. How many people, they just didn't see it. And it's just so easy to miss things. And so I've tried to make a conscientious, I've tried to notice people and try to reach out and help people just from this very thing. So I feel it's a blessing from God that He helped me. But yeah, it was rough. We went through a rough time, but it's been such a blessing too. And I felt my Heavenly Father's love deeper than I have in a long time.
You're more easily able to identify the one that's struggling.
I hope I'm more conscientious of it.
Okay.
I hope that I'm more aware and I've got eyes to see and a heart to feel.
That's wonderful.
So I can do that.
Well, thank you very much. This is Juleah Roberts, and I sure appreciate you taking the time to do this. And thank you.
Thank you.
Can lightning strike twice? It sure can. We had a second microburst and a second mudslide. Fortunately, it wasn't as severe, but here's what it left behind.
And it looks like it went over the sidewalk down here. This is the end of the flood, it looks like, right here at Dynamic Island.
Let's look at the rebuilding in progress now. So as I'm coming into the building, by the back of the building, the carpet's been removed, the walls weren't damaged here. But now we're coming around the corner and we'll see where walls have been repaired. This is inside the Relief Society room. More of the Relief Society room. Now we're back out into the hallway and a classroom. This, I believe, is the young women's room and the kitchen. And looking into the young women's room from the kitchen. This is the door that was breached where the mud came through. Now we're looking at the east foyer, and those are the glass doors that held back the mud. I thought it would be interesting to see a time lapse of the mud, the cleanup, and the rebuilding. In closing, I'd like to share a few thoughts with you. Since 2003, there have been protective barriers in place to safeguard against a situation exactly like this. However, earlier this year, those barriers were removed. When I visited Dynamic Collision Repair, I couldn't help but notice up on the wall of the office was this display. Let me read it to you. Wherefore, take upon you the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to withstand in the evil day, having done all to stand. We cannot afford to lower our defenses, not even for a moment, because when we do, that is when the adversary of all righteousness will attack us. It is interesting that after many years of no mudslides, the very year the barriers were removed, not one but 2 mudslides came down Buckley Draw. We might also remember that it was an inspired stake president who accurately predicted 1 week prior to the microburst that if one should happen, the mud would flow here. He was right. We would do well to follow our inspired leaders when they give us good counsel, for therein is our safety. There are many other lessons I learned from this experience, such as many of us felt as we were working together, we were worshiping together. I suppose there are many other lessons as well that you may have learned. If so, please leave them in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. Now I'd like to share a personal struggle. Thursday, the morning after the mudslide, for about 3.5 hours, I worked really hard on the cleanup, as shown in the video. I returned on Friday for a couple of more hours, shoveling mud. My wife requested I take Saturday off, for which I am grateful. Sunday was the Sabbath, so I rested. However, on Monday, I returned and helped as a shift supervisor, which was much easier. And at the time, I still felt quite strong. Then bit by bit, I began to notice a slight increase of difficulty with more physical struggle, walking, and performing other tasks. Yet I kept walking daily with a couple of bike rides each week. Despite the increased struggle, all seemed well until Saturday, September 20th. That Saturday morning, I went on a morning 14.5-mile bike ride with my son, and I felt great. When I got home, I realized I needed to shovel and sift some dirt and gravel. Previously, I could easily work 30 minutes, but on this day, after shoveling barely 20 minutes, I could hardly stand due to dizziness. Had I checked, I would have likely found my blood pressure had tanked and my oxygen levels low. Foolishly, I continued shoveling for 10 more minutes. After resting for about 2 to 3 hours, I walked my normal 2.5-mile route. However, that day, I did not feel strong, not in the least. I was again lightheaded and dizzy. From that day on, my strength continued to fail, and have noticed some of my old neurological symptoms returning, including difficulty riding in a car. My wife and I have been trying to understand why I crashed. It may seem as simple as I pushed too hard, which is true. However, there were a lot of factors going on at that time, well beyond the mudslide cleanup and yard work. During this time, there was a significant change in my supplemental oxygen therapy. I also took several emotional hits, starting with some conflicts at church. Then several extended family challenges really hurt. When Charlie Kirk was assassinated 8 miles from where I now sit, that hit me very hard, and I was in a state of shock. Then President Russell M. Nelson passed away, and not 12 hours later, the mass shooting at the Grand Blanc Chapel in Michigan occurred. That was another huge emotional blow. For the past 2 weeks, my wife and I have prayerfully and carefully strived to rebuild my health. Hopefully, as our chapel is being repaired, I too will be restored to health. It has now been over a month since I've been able to attend church meetings in person. I hope to attend tomorrow. I thank many of you who have reached out to me with kind words and offers to help. And of course, for your prayers. I still feel fragile and weak, but I know God is with me and will one day restore my health. Finally, whether in life or death, I am grateful to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. And I leave this with you in the sacred and holy name of Jesus Christ. Amen.